as part of its role as a critical stakeholder in the Nigerian economic space. Leading policy advocacy group, the Nigerian Economic Summit Group, hosted a roundtable on the ease of doing business in Nigeria. The roundtable was particularly focused on assessing the impact of the recent 60-day National Strategy and Action Plan of the federal government on enabling business environment between February 21st, 2017 to April 18th, 2017. It brought together business leaders and key players in the Nigerian economic space. In his opening remarks, the chairman of the NESG, Mr. Kyari Buka, spoke on the essence of the event.
This is something that is dear to my heart. The PEBC, in conjunction with NESG, having this so that it's one of the things that a manager loves to do is to share milestones, right? Having the right business environment does not necessarily mean we're doing it to attract foreign direct investment only. We're doing it so that we attract domestic investments as well. Because if it is easy for us to do business, then it would be extremely easy for an outsider to come and do business.
The event featured presentations on the developments so far in the efforts to improve ease of doing business in the country.
The reason why we chose these two bills for getting credit is to try to help SMEs access credit more readily. Collateral registry was launched in May 2016, and there's already about 7 billion naira worth of movable property registered on it by financial institutions. We want to solidify that framework legally so that banks are more comfortable with the platform and to use it. And that way it unlocks even movable property for SMEs and individuals to use their movable property as collateral. Also the credit bureau, encouraging credit histories and credit scores. We have about 3 functioning credit bureaus, also to legitimize that with legislation and to make sure that we engage in a lot of sensitization to make sure that SMEs can have these services and be more credit ready. Paying taxes, and I have my reform leader in that area here, we noticed that e-filing, e-processes, improvements, we actually visited firms, the top 4 in particular, and worked with FIRS and them to make sure that the processes were actually explained. We had training, we had feedback, engagement, what works for you, what actually complicates your life, and that went very well. I think they were quite happy with that level of engagement, and we've taken the feedback. So we made some traction there as well. Trading across borders has been particularly successful in our opinion in that we worked with Customs, Nigerian Ports Authority, the Ministry of Finance, the Central Bank, coordinated attempts to reduce a lot of the documentation to make sure goods imported into Nigeria are palletized, as is a requirement for many countries, so that it's faster to inspect, to coordinate the inspection of goods. And one of the most important things we were able to do, apart from releasing new import-export guidelines, was to make sure that the amount of documentation, and this was a presidential directive, the amount of documentation required for imports into Nigeria were 14, and that has been reduced to 8. And the amount of documentation for exports out of here were 10 and have been reduced to 7. Entry and exit of people, we've worked on visas, the processing time in our missions abroad. We've been working with Foreign Affairs and Immigration Service to make sure that it's 48 hours, it's work ongoing, and we've been tracking, especially the high density missions, to make sure that they're complying. They're not there yet, but we're working on it. Also, the visa on arrival, we've been working on that, making the process more e-friendly so that people don't have to go to see the Comptroller General, submit the letter of invitation in person. So now you can send it into a dedicated email address, and there's more signage when you come in using the visa on arrival. And we have had a lot of traction in simplifying that process. We're not there yet, and there have been some teething problems with the requirements and some people getting sent back sometimes, but we worked on that. Actually, about a couple of weeks ago, a directive was issued that process should be reviewed, and that has been stopped. It's what we're hoping to achieve, the impact in amount of time for travelers, 116 minutes. Another thing I should say is some of you may have noticed that we've already changed the arrival departure forms. It's now short, user-friendly, 15 questions. Everybody fills a departure form. Non-Nigerians fill an arrival form unless the Nigerian has a customs declaration to make. For SMEs, again, about 2.6 billion will be saved. Of course, we're hoping to move about 20 places in the rankings this year.
Part of the reasons customs harasses Nigerians when they arrive is that they want to check everything. That doesn't happen anywhere else. It's all about scanners. It's all about sniffer dogs. It's all about capacity and so on. Now, the point has been made. The Nigerian Customs Service knows exactly what to do, but they will tell you they don't have money, they don't have budget, and so on. So one of the things this project is supposed to deliver are the things that will make it easier for us to come into the country without too much hassle. You has already talked about visa on arrival and all that. Now, when it comes to departure, that's another story altogether. Nigeria is the only airport, Nigeria's airports are the only airport I know, I don't know of any, where they actually rummage through your luggage when you're checking in. I find that thing embarrassing, humiliating sometimes, and they put, it's just, the reason, again, no scanner. There is technology out there that is deployed in other airports in the world that the things they are looking for with their hands in your luggage and so on, they can see it on a screen if you have the right equipment. Now, what we need to do, we need to get scanners. It's as simple as that.
Stakeholders gave their views on the 60-day action plan on improving the Nigerian business environment.
Just to give you one example, when I heard them talking about the departure, the form we fill at departure, how many countries in the world do their own citizens fill a silly form to leave their own country? Name one for me if you can. Now, the point, we've been through this before. The agency sat down, the president was there. None of them could explain what the form was being used for. My conclusion was that somebody had a contract to print a form. That was his own way of increasing his income. So when we start modifying the form to make it simpler, we don't need the bloody form. That's the truth.
The idea that when you come into the country and when you go out, that your passport has to be seen by two people, I don't think you need any equipment to completely change that system. From what I hear as a journalist, it's just a question of trust between the SSS people on one side and the immigration people on one side.
Infrastructure, which for me is a central issue in improving the enabling environment, really to a large extent will not be addressed. And I think it's important that we all come to recognize that if there are three things that we must deal with in improving enabling environment, I would say to each and every one of you that it's infrastructure, infrastructure, infrastructure.
The last 2 weeks that have been out of regular work, I've had to engage more with the general public. And I see that a fundamental factor that we have as Nigerians, which we need to work on, is the fact that we are all very arrogant people, very proud over nothing. And so how do you get the mindset of people to change? And I think it starts off by your own approach to an individual.
The real benefit is getting into the room, because the mindset of people in government, basically, is that it's our own thing. Never mind that the money is being collected from you. So they collect it, like you said, they pocket it, and then basically it's not being used. But so the starting point is that there has to be a point of agreement. There has to be a point of, like working together.
Key personalities share their perspectives from the event.
Well, I think the challenges or even the areas to work on are well known. Whether it's movement of people in and out of the country, movement of goods in and out of the country, transparency in government and dealing with regulations, registering businesses and so on and so forth. All those areas are receiving attention, and I think the important thing is to actually implement right and to implement consistently and to implement sustainably.
It's been a very interesting 60 days. It's a lot of hard work, pushing, but I think SMEs, and that's the target of this intervention, I think there are little changes in the short term that could be done. We have medium to longer plans that need legislative intervention, that need more rigorous and drawn-out interventions, but I think we've been able to achieve quite a bit in the 60 days.
Okay, in your 60 days findings, which areas did you find most challenging?
I think, really, to be honest, how we scoped the different ones, it's more about what people are asking for. Even as we've presented, as we went, we did a midway review in 30 days. We had Starting a Business, Corporate Affairs Commission. We still had a lot of feedback. The portal still isn't stable, so we've been working on that, working on outsourcing the servers. There have been a lot of directives given, but they haven't necessarily come down. You mentioned customs. That's why we were having a stakeholder engagement last week. So the reduction in documentation, the new import-export guidelines, having it in the public purview, and then having the line officers know that these directives have been given by their ministers and agency heads, and that they're for immediate effect.
You see, I think the people from the Commission, and so they also said they went abroad, they took examples from other countries. You don't necessarily have to look at countries in Europe, but the other day I was at Nairobi airport. Now, in Kenya, which is a country that's poorer than Nigeria, they managed to have a state-of-the-art, beautiful, new functioning airport. Why is that not possible here? Of course, it is possible here, but there are certain powers that be that frustrate development and progress, maybe for their own benefit. Well, I think that's the main message today, was that it should be for the benefit of Nigeria and not for people's own benefit. So these bottlenecks should be removed, and that takes courage. It takes the private sector to take the action, but it takes the politicians in Abuja to make those steps, to have that courage, to say, we want to live in a country that functions. We want to live in a country where you have good airports, where you have good roads, where you have electricity. And that's not rocket science. It can be done in countries that are way poorer than Nigeria. So it can easily be done here. And don't say it's impossible. Just make that step. And I think that's basically the message that we had at this meeting. Make that first step and then push forward.
The 60-day action plan on enabling business environment by the federal government was a laudable effort, worthy of commendation. With the Presidential Enabling Business Environment Committee chaired by the Vice President, it is expected that the key issues affecting the business environment will be tackled, translating to an improvement in Nigeria's ranking in the Ease of Doing Business Index.